Hello, everyone. It's Mr. Nobody coming at you with another episode of Making Nobody Happy. But today, the question I want to talk about is why must we see beauty? And I don't mean why can we see beauty, although I would like to think we could begin to answer that question, but rather, why must we see beauty? Why is it something that's almost unavoidable? And in answering this, I have to say, a lot of the thoughts that I came up with definitely had some influence from Camille Paglia. If you've read some of her books on art, they delve deeply into psychology and very primordial archetypal sorts of things, as a somewhat Jungian conception of things. There's a lot of the masculine and feminine, the anima and the animus mixed in with there. And in her understanding of the psychological work that art is doing in societies and the way that it is conceptualized, the way ideas are personified. So, keeping that in mind, I'm going to give some thoughts on some of my answers, one possible way that we could take it answering this question. Now, I think beauty is a very strange concept. I've taken multiple classes trying to answer the questions of what is beauty, what is art, and they've always been very tangled and complicated courses that left you with a lot more questions than answers, and no sense of real certainty or finality, and ended up often straying too deeply into the thickets of deep underlying things in the human mind that became, like I said, very mystical, very symbolic, very emotional, very archetypal. These aren't easy questions to answer, and when you try to reduce them, you don't reduce them. You can connect beauty to things below it. But it always pushes out to become something far bigger than that, which I think that it is. So, one thing that I notice about beauty is that it is part of the essence of beauty that it invites you to participate in it and make it a part of the extended idea of yourself. That's why we wear beautiful clothes. It's why we want to move to or visit beautiful places. We want to make them our home. It's why we want to make our homes beautiful, and we surround ourselves with so many objects of beauty. We want to make them part of us, and we want to make us part of them. Beauty invites us and invites us to inhabit it and be in this relationship with it. Now, if we're looking at where did beauty come from? What are the first things that awaken our mind to it? I would actually say that I believe that the feminine is the original object of love and beauty. We have expanded the category beauty to so many things, and there are so many beautiful things we have managed to create by craft. But before all those things, I think women are the original embodiment of that spark for the aesthetic sense. And so our ideas of beauty are very tangled up deep down in our minds with the idea of the feminine itself. Woman is the ultimate vessel of beauty, the most inherently beautiful thing, and the oldest beautiful thing. Two other things that we really associate deeply with beauty are nature, like growing life, growing living things, and the sea. That's another just fundamental category. Those two across virtually every civilization that's ever encountered them. Those are primordial conceptions of beauty and sources of beauty to humans. They're just ancient beyond imagining in the mind of humanity. And we associate in culture after culture this idea of living nature, the earth, with the feminine. And many people also, the sea was often viewed as feminine. And on a side note, women have a body shape that certainly arouses comparisons with certain sea creatures. There's something people have often found feminine about the sea itself, and sailors have often referred to it that way. So right there you have three of the great environments that we have inhabited as a species. The living world, nature, the world of water, the sea, and one another. Our family, other people, the people you're with, women, they're half the species. You have inhabited them. They are part of your world. We've all emerged from these, as species themselves emerge from nature and life from water. Water is this giver of life. These are all literal and figurative wombs. These are places of gestation. We have that same association with nature and the sea as womb-like places where life is gestated and emerges from. And at some point we become conscious and we turn to regard these ancient environments and we conceptualize them with the feminine. We use this concept to think about them, because that's the first thing that our personal and our mythological awareness touches. That's one of the first things we encounter. We literally emerge from our mothers and experience our mothers as the place where we have gestated and been born and are nurtured. So it's this very first experience that we have. It becomes lodged very deeply into the architecture, the underlying architecture of our mind. And I think that's the thing about a lot of these things. They're built into the deep architecture of the mind. Now, when we're talking about other species, the feminine is grasped very effectively by other species, but not on a conscious level. It's an unconscious and instinctive level. They don't need to understand it like we would and write a book about it to be compelled by it, for it to structure their world and their desires and their affiliations. The capacity to conceptualize the feminine would require being able to conceptualize the self. And since animals can't do that, they worship in ignorance by compulsion what we worship knowingly and can either embrace or reject. And that's some of the division. And it's not that other animals, clearly femininity is enormous to them. But as I said, there is no conscious understanding of it, and there isn't that aspect of being able to embrace or reject it. They just do. So once the feminine has been grasped as a distinct conceptual entity attaining to certain primordial forces and specific entities, that means once you've understood it, this idea that's unifying things, this thing that sits at the back of your mind, once you've managed to pull that actively forward into your consciousness, you can start to represent it. It is beautiful. It is desirable. What are the very first objects of art that we encounter? So many of them are things like a statue of a woman, and in a very primordial feminine sort of way. So we begin to take then this conceptual entity of the feminine and the associations with it. And as I said, you can begin to represent it. You can begin to make things that present it to you or represent it to you. This is that here is this thing. It is beautiful. It is desirable. One might even say that it is desire, as it is the avatar of that which is fundamentally desirable. And there are motivational associations built into us so deeply that they get tangled up and they get used by our more complex systems and conceptions. There's a lot of borrowing and overlap that goes on in our mind between the really deep things and the really high up complex things. Why invent new essential desires and associations when we already possess and can contextualize ones that we already have? So let me give you an example of this. Like ripe fruit, it's good, it's desirable, it looks good. Our visual senses are keyed to identify these colors and these shapes of these desirable objects. And when we look at a woman, you see the blush of the young cheek, you see the roundness and softness of the body, of the hips. It's not just a coincidence. I know we often make these comparisons in poetry, but this isn't just poetic serendipity, it's convergence, not just of one with the other, but of both with each other. Fruit is feminine, literally feminine, and the feminine is fruitful, literally fruitful. So the question is then, as I said, what makes seeing beauty necessary? Because it isn't really obvious, except for the fact that we do. We kind of just say, well, yeah, we see beauty. We do see it. But the truth is there are so many senses that we don't have. There's an almost infinite array of things of which we are not aware and do not perceive and do not possess as evaluative categories. Why not see that? That's the easy question, because by default it contains almost everything. You don't actually perceive the majority of everything that could be perceived. And plenty of animals get by without seeing most of what we see and without caring about most of what we care about. So why is seeing beauty necessary for us? Because beauty isn't obviously just an extension of utility. Art, by its nature, is not necessary. It is creative. It didn't have to be. And often the purpose of beautiful things isn't closely tied to just some merely functional utility, although beauty can often be a reliable marker of something that is of immense utility, especially in nature. Nature especially uses beauty as an effective communicator. But there are lots of very useful things that aren't very beautiful, especially for the amount of attention that we give to them. I was also going to say, and there's also lots of beautiful things that don't seem on the face of it especially useful, especially for the amount of attention that we give to them and the fact that we don't necessarily do anything with those things other than just appreciate them. You think of something like music and also types of art. Now, you could argue that appreciation itself actually is a kind of use, that beauty is a psychological good, like an existentially useful object, and we use it by participating in it, by appreciating it, by making it part of our experience and making it part of our mental landscape and our extended idea of ourselves and of the world. Like I said, beauty has this invitation: become part of me, make me part of you, the extended idea of you. Now, that is a kind of use, but it is a very odd one. It doesn't explain itself much. It doesn't really explain what demands that it exist as a perceptive capacity. What makes seeing beauty necessary? What makes valuing beauty necessary? It apparently is. We all seem to just agree with that on some fundamental, on an instinctive level, by our behavior, but why? And I would say I believe that in a mythological, originational sense, women make seeing beauty necessary, because women use beauty as a signal for biological health, for reproductive fitness, for desirability. I don't mean they use it as a matter of craft and design, although that has become a conscious feature of humanity, and we make the production of beauty a conscious goal and something we do with craft. But women use beauty as an unconscious signal entirely without intention. And men and women both possess it as a signal entirely without intention. We also do it intentionally, but the system would work, and it did work even if we didn't have any of these things, and even before we had all of the craft that we have to enhance our beauty. The system worked before we had all that stuff. And before we were really aware of it. It's a precognitive system. It exists before all this other stuff that has been added to it as we have gained more consciousness and representation, more ability to do things, to create it around us. Now, men, of course, do possess beauty, partly insofar as a lack of it is an honest indicator for men also of a lack of health. And also insofar as we are all part of a shared species. So we all share to varying degrees in all of the qualities that our species possesses. But beauty isn't a primary signal in male signaling, nor is it a primary evaluative criteria for women. It's not like that is the thing. That is the thing that they are showing, and that is the thing that I am looking for. A lot of the qualities that males possess, specifically as males, are actually detrimental to their beauty and antagonistic to it. There's a lot of things about me, just as a man, that frankly make me actively less beautiful. And it takes work to try and get things just back to sort of an okay level. And then males really do fixate to a much greater degree on beauty as a primary signal, whereas women include it, among a host of very complex and interacting considerations. And men will, men take other qualities. I'm not saying men are just completely shallow, but even where they take other qualities into consideration, they typically conceptualize them. They think about them as extensions of beauty. A sort of meta beauty, a beautiful heart, a beautiful soul. They think of all these things. They see beauty as this very primary underlying concept of what is being shown to them and what they're looking for, and they can complexify that and extend that to all these other things, but they get all pulled in through that underlying architecture and conceptualization of basically an extended, complexified idea of beauty. But women don't generally do that to men. They don't, by habit, define men's attractiveness across multiple domains as some extended concept of beauty. That's just not how they tend to think about it. So, as a necessity for the life and the function of the species, we have to be able to perceive beauty. It's something that men have to be able to see in women, and it's something women also see in themselves and each other. It's a fundamental part of something that makes life work for us as a species. And so you can't get away from it. It is necessary for the life and function of the species to be able to perceive beauty, because you can't escape from women. No human being has ever managed to come into existence entirely apart from women. Even if you were somehow, I have no idea, raised completely alone, surviving completely alone, the point is, you can't get away from it. Women can't be escaped. They're part of the universe for us. And this is something you have to see. The features of the feminine are foundational and primordial, and beauty is a part of their essence, and it's part of our response to that essence. And we call that response love of beauty. And that response is innate. It's a fundamental instinct to seek that which is inherently good and fruitful and desirable. Now, it emerges with consciousness out of the underlying systems that structure life and make it possible. Women make us see beauty. They open our eyes to it as a species. And that is a wonderful thing. That is an amazing thing. What a gift they have given us. What a gift they give us every day to see it and be reminded, to be brought into this world through this very simple, tangible thing. It has opened up this whole larger, more extended way of seeing the world. And I think that's just, it's a beautiful thing. It's worthy of veneration. It's worthy of recognizing and giving respect, even though it's also something that is quite fearful and terrible. Because few things in life are as terrible and fearful as love. And that's all for today. We'll see you next time.